She didn't leave. It's what everyone says when they look at me. But they're wrong, because leaving means a choice, a decision, a goodbye. She didn't do any of that. She disappeared. Not overnight, not suddenly. Slowly. So slowly that I didn't even notice that. The moment I lost her, she still slept beside me, still ate at the same table, still smiled when people were watching. But the woman I married, she was already gone. And the most terrifying part is I helped her disappear. If you've ever loved someone, who slowly became a stranger, this story will hit different. Subscribe, because stories like this didn't end the way you expect. At first, nothing looked wrong. That's the scary part. Our life didn't fall apart overnight. It stayed normal. We woke up at the same time, drank tea from the same cups, talked about bills, work, plans. From the outside, we looked fine, but something had changed. She stopped arguing, and I thought that was a good thing. No fights meant peace, right? No raised voices, no slammed doors, just silence. At dinner, she nodded more than she spoke. At night, she turned her back a little sooner than before. Her phone became more interesting than my words. I noticed it, of course I did, but I told myself stories. She's just tired. She's stressed. This is what marriage becomes, so I stopped asking questions. I stopped trying to impress her. Stopped telling her about my day in detail. Stopped noticing when she dressed nicely, because it wasn't for me anymore. We weren't fighting, but we weren't connecting either, and somehow, that felt easier. Weeks passed, then months. We became polite roommates, sharing a life that no longer touched. The laughter faded first, then the warmth, then the need to explain ourselves to each other. And the worst part, I got used to it. I didn't realize this wasn't peace. It was distance learning how to breathe between us. And while I was busy calling it normal, she was quietly learning how to live without me. The day I noticed she was gone didn't come with drama. No shouting, no packed suitcases, no slammed door. It came quietly, like the moment you realize a room feels colder, even though the heater's on. That morning she didn't say goodbye. Not unusual, I told myself, but her coffee cup was still full. She always finished her coffee. I stood there for a second longer than needed, staring at it, trying to remember the last time she'd left it untouched. I couldn't. At work, I texted her something small. A habit. A reflex. Busy day. The message showed delivered. Reply. Hours passed. Normally, she'd respond with something short, an emoji. A single word. This time, nothing. By the time I got home, the house felt staged, clean but not warm, organized but empty. Her shoes weren't by the door. Her scarf wasn't on the chair. I called her name. No answer. I checked the bedroom. Closet door open. Her favorite jacket was gone. That's when the weight hit my chest, not panic, yet just confusion wrapped in denial. She probably went out, I whispered, more to calm myself than because I believed it. I sat on the couch and waited. Minutes stretched into an hour. I kept replaying the last real conversation we'd had. I couldn't remember it, not clearly. Just fragments, her asking questions I brushed off, her pauses growing longer. Her eyes searching my face for something I no longer gave. The clock ticked. My phone stayed silent. That's when I noticed something else. A note. Not dramatic. Not emotional. Just a folded piece of paper on the kitchen counter. No hearts, no tears, just words written carefully, like someone who had already cried all the tears before picking up the pen. I need space. Please don't look for me. I'll reach out when I'm ready. My hand shook, not violently, but enough to blur the words. Gone, not left. Gone. I called her, straight to voicemail. I texted again. Then again. Nothing. And suddenly, all the silence from the past months rushed back at once. Every ignored look, every unfinished sentence, every moment I chose comfort over connection. This wasn't sudden. This was planned quietly, patiently, while I was busy assuming she'd always be there. That night, I lay on our bed alone. Her pillow still smelled like her. And that's when the fear truly arrived, not the fear of being alone, but the fear that she had already practiced being without me. Loving someone who has already let go feels like standing in the rain, holding an umbrella they no longer need. The days after she disappeared blurred together. I went through the motions: work, food, sleep, but everything felt hollow, like I was living inside an echo of my own life. Every habit betrayed me. I'd reach for my phone to tell her something small. A thought, a joke, a complaint about traffic. Then I'd remember there was no one on the other side anymore. Not really. I replayed our past over and over, searching for the exact moment she stopped being with me. Not physically, but emotionally. That moment doesn't announce itself. It hides inside ordinary days. I remembered how she used to talk about her dreams. How her voice once carried excitement, urgency. Somewhere along the way, those conversations became one-sided. She'd speak, I'd nod. Promise later. Later never came. She stopped arguing first. At the time, I thought that meant peace. Now I knew better. People don't stop arguing when they stop caring. They stop arguing when they stop hoping. I opened drawers I hadn't touched in years. Old notebooks, photos, small reminders of a woman who used to laugh louder, ask deeper questions, expect more from me. There were signs everywhere. Her silence at dinner. The way she'd look at me just a second too long, as if waiting for me to notice something obvious. The nights she turned away before falling asleep. I mistook her withdrawal for independence. It was surrender. One evening, I finally gathered the courage to read our old messages. The early ones were full of warmth, plans, jokes, late-night conversations that stretched until morning. Slowly, the tone changed. Her words became shorter, her questions fewer. She was already grieving us while I was still comfortable. That realization hurt more than her leaving, 'cause it meant she didn't disappear overnight. She faded right in front of me. I checked her social media once. She hadn't posted anything new, but her profile picture was different. Just her. No couple photo, no trace of me. It felt like confirmation. She had rewritten her life without my input. Friends asked how I was doing. I lied. I'm fine, I said. She just needed space. What I didn't say was that space had existed between us long before she physically left. Just pretended it wasn't there. At night, I'd imagine conversations we might have if she came back. All the things I'd say differently. All the ways I'd finally listen. But deep down, I knew the truth. You can't fix a relationship at the point where one person has already accepted its ending. She wasn't angry. She wasn't dramatic. She was done. And that's what made it unbearable. Loving someone who has already let go means every memory becomes heavier. Not because it was bad, but because it could have been saved. If I had noticed sooner, if I had chosen her over distractions, if I had understood that love doesn't die loudly, it starves quietly. One night I whispered her name into the dark, hoping stupidly that somehow she'd hear it. She didn't. Because when someone lets go, they don't just release you. They release the version of you that mattered to them. All you're left with is the echo. The truth doesn't arrive all at once. It comes quietly in pieces, when you're finally tired of lying to yourself. I stopped asking where she went. Instead, I asked why she needed to leave without saying goodbye. That question sat with me for days, then weeks. Until one evening, while cleaning the apartment for no real reason, I found something I wasn't supposed to see. Not traumatic. Just forgotten. Folded note inside an old book she used to read. It wasn't addressed to me. It hurt more than if it had been. The words weren't angry. They weren't accusing. They were calm. To calm, she wrote about feeling invisible, about trying to speak in a house full of silence, about loving someone who was present in body but absent in choice. And then one line stopped me cold. I left before I started hating you. That was the moment everything shifted. I finally understood that her disappearance wasn't punishment. It was mercy. For both of us, I realized she didn't want explanations or closure. She had already closed the door gently, hoping I'd notice before it slammed shut. I sat on the floor for a long time after that, holding the paper like it might change if I read it again. It didn't. The truth settled in my chest. I could keep chasing her absence, or I could face my own. Not the absence she created, but the one I lived with while she was still there. I thought about reaching out, typing a message, asking for one last conversation. But then I asked myself a harder question. Would that be for her or for me? Sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't asking someone to come back. It's accepting that they already moved on while you were standing still. I folded the note carefully and put it back where I found it. Not because I wanted to forget, because I finally understood she didn't leave to hurt me. She left to save herself. And the silence she left behind wasn't empty anymore. It was honest. Some stories don't end with answers. They end with acceptance. I used to think closure meant hearing the other person say why. But now I know closure is something you give yourself when you stop replaying the past and start listening to what it taught you. She didn't disappear to be cruel. She disappeared because staying meant losing herself completely, and I stayed behind long enough to finally see what I ignored when she was still there. If this story felt familiar, if it touched something you don't usually talk about, then you're not alone. Many of us live beside someone, loving them quietly, until one day the silence becomes louder than any argument. If you've ever lost someone without a goodbye, take a moment and reflect. What would you change if you noticed the silence earlier? Share your thoughts in the comments. Sometimes writing it out is the first step toward healing. And if you don't want to miss stories that explore love, loss, and the moments that change us forever, make sure to subscribe. These stories aren't just entertainment, they're mirrors. Thank you for staying until the end. Take care of your heart. Listen closely when love goes quiet.